Hello friends, today I'm reviewing Paul McCartney's 2020 album McCartney 3. This was his lockdown album. It was self-produced, he wrote everything on it, he played everything on it, and this is the fruits of his work during the terrible pandemic which we all had to go through. It became his first #1 album in the UK since 1989, and Paul says its themes are home, family and love. Had a big promotional campaign, and you may have seen some of the posters which use the actual notation from the music in an interesting way to kind of draw people in to the album. So what do we think about it? Well, I'm reviewing all of Paul McCartney's albums, including all the Beatles albums, all the Wings albums and all of his solo albums. I've done a few so far. How does this one fit in? As usual, I rate each track out of 10. This is my individual system here. Most tracks will get between an average and a very good. Occasionally they might creep up into the top and some may go lower down there. But I'm looking for most tracks here to be somewhere in the middle, good, very good, or fairly good, or perhaps average. Track number 1 is Long-Tailed Winter Bird. This is an instrumental, which sounds a bit like an extended piece of film music. The title came from a bird book that Paul was reading, apparently. It was the first one to be recorded. It does have some lyrics in it about Do You Miss Me, but the whole thing mainly is an instrumental. It's a whimsical melody, I find, with a combination of guitars being used, then a delicious bit of bass coming in, and the layers are all different, and I enjoy the way they go together. There's some exciting sounds here. Some bits remind me slightly of the sort of Beverly Hills Cop theme, those sort of instruments coming in there, which is quite enjoyable. I like the different voices. It's like they're having a conversation with each other, and then the vocal comes in as an extra layer to that. It poses the question, do you miss me? But it doesn't answer it. That's okay. It leaves it hanging there in the air. And it sounds satisfying on a good hi-fi system. Maybe it's slightly overlong, but I still enjoyed listening to it. I would rate this as fairly good. I'm going to give it 5. Track number 2 is Find My Way. It's got a kind of theme of being afraid, addressing anxieties during the lockdown. And the kind of message from Paul here is, try not to worry so much. Find a way through all this. The kind of theme reminded me a little bit of that John Lennon track, Nobody Told Me There'd Be Days Like These, which we can apply to lots of different situations in life, can't we? So Paul is saying, let me be your guide through this. You never used to be afraid of days like these, but now you're overwhelmed. And we all have that sense of being overwhelmed, didn't we, at times, not knowing how things were going to turn out. There's a driving pop rhythm to this. Paul's using his sort of high voice for the advice on the refrain, and that's an interesting contrast. The melody is quite infectious, if I may use that word, and it's a fun track. And it's got this pretend ending, which then comes back with another surprise bit. So again, I reckon this is fairly good. I'm going to give it 5. Now, track number 3 is a kind of more reflective track called Pretty Boys, and Paul saw bicycles for hire in New York and London, and I sort of compared them with the idea of male models being objects of desire and there to be used, a row of cottages for rent, and he's kind of exploring the idea of them being exploited in their roles here. So this is quite a hard-hitting track in a way. We've got guitar only for the introduction, and the vocal comes in, and a little bit of rhythm, so the different layers coming in there. Does he make his point? Well, yes, if he's highlighting this exploitation, then I think this is well done and done in quite an interesting way. And he's addressing this idea of models in the fashion industry, what their point is and how other people might sort of exploit them. It's a fine melody, perhaps not that expansive, but it's interesting to listen to. I rate this as a good track. I'm going to give it 6 marks. Now, Paul said that he was trying to sound a bit like Leadbelly on the 4th track, Women and Wives. He's using that kind of deeper, richer voice. It's kind of a bluesy baritone, I think it's been described as. Paul plays the bass on here belonging to Bill Black, who was Elvis's bass player. So a nice link back there with early pioneering sort of rock and roll and blues. Now, the theme of this song is about what we do matters to others. Our actions have consequences. Teach your children and then they can pass it to others. So there's a good theme to this. Model good behaviour and others will follow after that. There's some strong keyboards on this. I think it's a decent track, enjoyable to listen to. I rate it fairly good as well, 5 marks. Now, track number 5 is another fun one. This is Lavatory Lil, based on an unknown person, but possibly someone Paul worked with who turned out to be a bad character. Did he create this character? Is it based on somebody? We don't really know, but it leaves that hanging in the air and could be compared with John's track Polythene Pam. Now, you think she's being friendly, but she's looking for a Bentley. So some nice little barbed comments in there. Quite a bitter lyric to go with this bluesy rock sound. There's a driving call and response opening. Of course, Paul responding to himself in the studio, but that works quite well. A semi-comic song. He's settling some old scores. Again, an enjoyable listen. I'm going to give it fairly good and 5 marks. By the way, some people have commented that they think I'm marking things too low. Remember, this is my system of how much I enjoy it. For me, 5, as I say, is fairly good. 6 is good. 7 is very good. So, if I'm using those sort of marks, it means I like them a lot. Track number 6 is Deep, Deep Feeling, a kind of experimental track that emerged from a sort of a jamming session that Paul was involved in. It's a very long 8.5 minutes, but I reckon it just about holds the attention throughout that. It's almost like a prog rock track, maybe, going back to some of those supergroups. What's he saying here? When you love someone so much, you feel your heart's going to burst. So this kind of comes out of deep love for someone. Pretty special message in a way. And there's a coda at the end, which is perhaps more of a traditional arrangement for what's come before, if you see what I mean. So the bit at the end may be a sort of how it could have emerged, but the bit before is how it actually did emerge. And it's quite nice to have the two to compare them with each other. He says essentially about love, how it feels to be deeply in love with another. It almost hurts. Yeah, if you've experienced that, the feelings can be so strong sometimes. It's almost like painful memories, except it's such a strong feeling. We've got some very deep drums on this, some eerie synth strings, which are quite spine-tingling in places. It's intricately layered, individually expressed, and then it comes together collectively. So you've got a bit here, a bit there, and then they come over the top of each other. Pretty clever stuff going on here. So it becomes quite a fascinating soundscape and almost cinematic in its length. So definitely worth listening to this. I rate this as very good. I'm going to give it 7 marks. Track number 7 is a pretty heavy sliding. Started this during the Egypt station sessions, actually, this one, from a sound check, and it's kind of inspired by the idea of skaters and snowboarders at the Winter Olympics. It's got this thrilling opening, like some sort of superhero soundtrack almost, and kind of a feeling of a heavy metal concert. There's lots of voice experiments going on in here, but is this actually a good song, and do the effects actually mask this? I'm not sure about this one. Maybe it takes a few more listens. I think it's probably average, not quite as good as some of the others. I'm going to give it a 4. Track 8 is The Kiss of Venus and was inspired by a book Paul was reading about the movement of the planets. It's about harmony in the skies and how kind of small we are in the scale of things. We've got just Paul's voice and guitar on this and some harpsichord, which is not a favourite instrument of mine, I must admit, on tracks. The melody is quirky and uses semitone intervals between some of the notes. Paul uses a very high vocal range on this. I'm not sure whether that adds to it or not. It might have been better in a lower register. There's kind of a sort of Blackbird feel to this, but I don't find a great deal of interest in this. And for me, it's the weakest track on the album. Below average from me. I'm going to give it 3. Sorry. Track number 9 is Seize the Day. The message here is that not every day will be sunny, but hang on to the good times. It was based around a kind of a random line that came to Paul about Yankee toes and Eskimos. He kind of built the rest of the song around that, which is interesting. He's saying, we'll wish that we had held on to that day, seize the day. The reverse and the refrain here fit tightly into each other. There's a decent hook on the refrain, there's a positive message, it's uplifting, it's pleasant to listen to. I say it's fairly good, going to give it 5. Track number 10 is Deep Down. This again started out as a jam. It's about having a deep relationship with someone. And it's clearly built around a very short chord sequence, but it's got a great groove, a kind of mystical start with a slight sort of ska feeling to it. There's a crisp drum sound on this, You just sink into this track and you actually don't mind the length or the repetition, because each time that sequence comes back it's slightly different from how it was before. It almost doesn't matter what it's about. It's what you can do with a short chord sequence and a short lyric and vocal improvisation. And towards the end, when Paul's doing these yeahs with this sort of cracking voice, really, it's quite spine-tingling. I absolutely love this track. I know I've heard some other people criticising it on reviews. I'm really happy with this, and for me it's the standout track on the album. It's very, very enjoyable. I reckon excellent. 8 marks. Thanks, Paul. Now, the last track is a combination of a little bit of Winter Bird coming back, and then this links into When Winter Comes. Now, this was originally recorded in 1992, at the same time as Great Day in Calico Skies, but it's kind of been unearthed and brought back onto this. It's just Paul and the guitar, and it's about an idealistic existence, almost a hippie existence, being on the farm, enjoying being close to nature, enjoying the peace of it. He says, we'll warm our toes to stay indoors when summer's gone. And it's really laid back and it's really enjoyable. It's a whimsical song. It's about contentment. It's a bit like the Egypt Station song, you know, Happy With You, that sort of mood. I love that song as well. Interesting melody. It feels like a Beatles song, an early Wings song. I really enjoy this one. I'm going to rate it as a good track and give it 6 marks. So we end up with a total of 59 marks for 11 tracks. That gives us an average of 5.36 per track. Have a look at my rating system, 5.36. Almost every track there is good. So I'm saying this is a good album and I really enjoyed it. So just looking at the top of my song rankings here, we have got one track from McCartney 3 getting an 8 there. That's going along with If I Fell, All My Loving and Early Days. Those are my favourite Paul McCartney tracks so far. I've only reviewed, I don't know, about 6 or 7 albums so far. And there's some 7s coming in there as well. Deep, Deep Feeling, another favourite from that one. So I've actually reviewed 114 tracks so far. The only one coming in lower down there, we've got The Kiss of Venus, I gave a 3 to, and Sliding a 4. Still means I like those tracks, I just didn't enjoy them quite as much as some of the others. And this is how the album fits in with the others I reviewed so far from Paul McCartney. It's coming in there in 5th place out of 8. Again, the more I listen to Paul McCartney, the more I want to review some of these ones I've done, because I'm actually really starting to warm to more of the tracks in London Town now. So the more I listen to that, so it's strange. So these may change, but at the moment I've got New and Egypt Station at the top, then A Hard Day's Night with the Beatles, and then McCartney 3 coming in here. But you know, the more I hear a lot of these tracks, the more I like them. So I may go back and re-review some of these. Now, for what it's worth, here are all the albums I've reviewed so far and their average track rating. So Elton John's Tumbleweed Connection, Goodbye Lyric Road at the top, then ABBA's Arrival, then another few Elton John ones. Paul McCartney's New coming in there. Where does this one come in? Well, we've got Egypt Station there, and then we've got McCartney 3 down here. It's in about 31st place. And I've reviewed, how many have I reviewed altogether? I've reviewed 48 albums. So that's how it's going so far. So what do you think of this album? I thought it was really interesting. You know, I don't like every single track on it. I've enjoyed listening to them all. There's a couple of standouts for me on there. Have you heard it? What did you think of the tracks? I've enjoyed Paul McCartney's last 3 albums, New and Egypt Station particular. I love both of those albums. This one is pretty good. But you know, how does it rate with all his albums? I don't know yet because I've only reviewed 7 of them. But I'm really enjoying this project. So stay with me and maybe let me know your favourite track on this album, what you thought of it, and how it compares to his other solo work. I'll be back with more reviews soon. Thanks for watching.